Hi, you're listening to After Dinner Conversations, short stories for long discussions. What that means is we get short stories, we select those short stories, and then we discuss them specifically about the ethics and the morality of the choices the characters and the situations put us in. Why did you do this? What makes you do this? What makes us good people? What's the nature of truth, goodness, all of that sort of stuff. And hopefully we're all better, smarter people for it and learn a little bit about why we think the way we think. So thank you for listening.
Okay, you are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions, where we get short stories, we talk about them, we talk about the philosophy and ethics of them. We are actually together. I haven't been to record a podcast. I've never recorded a podcast with you in person before.
Nope.
Because every time, I'm going to move your microphone closer to you. You're killing me. Because every time we've done it, since you've been doing it, we've been remote.
Right.
And this is our first time.
Yep. Hi, Kolby.
This is going to be really awkward. This is going to be super
I'm
socially
really
awkward.
excited about this.
I don't know if I am. And you did the one with Jeremy because this is our season 5 thing. For those of you who don't know, we are now decided to start rotating who's doing them. So we'll mix it up. It's going to be a mix and match all the time. And so, it'll be like a rotation thing. So the last one was you and Jeremy. This one will be you and me. Mm-hmm. The next one, I think, is Jeremy and I, if I'm remembering correctly. And Ashley will be back in for some of these too. So we'll do some with 2 people, some with 3 people, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're just trying out the new format. Anything else I'm missing? The story, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do the story. Yay. Okay, so the story is Home for the Holidays by Alexis Dubon, D-U-B-O-N. I'm really bad at pronouncing names. And I'll do the quick little summary.
Okay.
The last one, I haven't heard your last podcast yet. Who did the summary, you or Jeremy?
Jeremy did it.
Okay. Do you wish now that you had done it?
No, we did fine.
Okay,
he
good.
did great.
No, I'm sure he did great. Okay, so the story for this one is pretty straightforward. The guy, the main character, comes home for the holidays. He hasn't been home in like a year or 2 or something. He does the long drive home. He gets home, he knocks on the door, and his parents are tiny people.
Really
tiny. Like they have shrunk to like 2 or 3 feet tall or something. Mm-hmm. They're still correctly portioned, but not like dwarfisms or whatever. They just like magically got tinier. And then they see their son, and they're like, oh my God, you've been afflicted with the ginormous disease. And he's like, no, you got tiny. And they're like, no, you got ginormous. And so he comes in to join them for the holidays. And he basically gets their spiel that they've been getting from news, media, talk radio. Right. That's basically this idea that's being pushed around that not that they're getting small, but that everyone else is getting big. And there's a vast conspiracy to basically be like, yeah, don't let the media tell you that you're getting small. Everyone else is getting big, blah, blah, blah. And so his parents genuinely believe that everything is getting big, that the TV got bigger, that the turkeys got bigger, that all the people got bigger, and some percentage of the population has stayed the correct size, which is actually now tiny. And I never really got a sense of the percentages, did you? I felt like it was like 5 or 10% of the population was shrinking or something.
Yeah.
Because he says
I feel like it's more than that.
Maybe more like a third, something like that.
Still.
Yeah, and so he tries to initially to reason with them and be like, hey, Mom and Dad, doesn't it seem odd that your TV and everything in your house but you got bigger but you? And they're like, yeah, it's weird, but that's the way it goes. And they're like, what about the neighbor's house? The neighbor's house also got bigger. And they're like, yeah, poor neighbors. And so they really genuinely have bought into their media consumption, would be the way to say it. And so their view on that. And he leaves. He doesn't even stay for dinner. And he kind of leaves bewildered. But he does notice on his drive home that some of the children he saw playing in the street were actually some of these like tiny people that he thought, oh, I must have mistaken them for children. But in actuality, they are, this is like a third of the population that's shrinking.
Right.
Okay. So it's a short story, by the way. And it's a little on the nose, which you mentioned right before we started. But man, is it like, it's such a clever nose.
Yeah. It's, oof, that the argument, the classic holiday argument, where everybody is 100% convinced of their point of view.
Yeah.
And this is like the like literal personification of that. Like,
Yes.
You are wrong, and
Yes.
why can't you see things the way I see them?
Yeah.
And so I think that is really at the heart of this story, and the way that it's presented with the tiny-sized people is absurd.
It is absurd. I totally get the absurd part. I wondered, because I feel like everyone, this is a very appropriate holiday recording.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone goes home for the holiday and they have an uncle or a cousin or somebody that they barely know who's like, let me tell you the problem with immigrants. And you're just like, oh my God, seriously? Or let me tell you the problem with, whatever. I mean, you can replace it with the moron du jour, right? Like,
let me tell you what the problem is in schools these days.
Yes, with schools these days. Let me tell you the problem with kids these days. Let me tell you could be a flat earther. You could be a super conservative. You could be a super liberal. You could be all of these things. I mean, that's what's so cool about this, right? Like, I saw these people as a stand-in for like Trumpism. But here's the thing. That's because those are the people that I feel this way about.
Right.
If I was a pro-Trump person, I would look at socialists and be like, this is a great story because it's a stand-in for the stupidity of socialists.
Right.
And I think for me, that was one of the geniuses of the story, is it's so absurd that anyone from any slice of life can insert their absurd people into it. Whether you're conservative, you can put liberals in. If you're liberal, you can put conservatives in. And for me, that was really the genius of the story, is the lack of applicability to modern... Like, if they had ever said, the president says, or something like that, then you're like, oh, I know which side this writer's on.
Right.
But the way it's written, you never know that.
Yeah.
Super clever.
It is. Yeah, it's kind of absent any real
Tells.
political... Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking for the name of the publication he was talking about, because the Sun...
But it was also like a fake publication name, right? Right.
Like
if they just said Fox News, I'd have been like, oh, I know what this is about.
It was some weird thing. But he questions his parents and says, how come they're not talking about this anywhere but in this one publication that you guys insist on only reading?
Yeah.
And so I was looking for the name of it, because I thought the name might be significant, but it's okay. He only mentions it like one time.
Yeah. So here's one of the things that I thought about, and this is, I feel like this is the clever thing I got out of this. Because a lot of it I just thought was really good, but then as I was reading it, I was like trying to think of all the different ways to turn it. Why we assume that the son is right, because like the house got bigger, everything got bigger, blah 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 blah. But why? Why is he right and they're wrong? Why? I mean, there is no absolute measuring stick, point, whatever. Like,
it's kind of like Occam's razor, though, isn't it? Isn't it more like, isn't the simpler solution that they got smaller rather than the entire world got enormous around them?
Sure. And that would make sense, but that doesn't make it impossible.
No.
That makes it unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's like the first time somebody told me, why is the North Pole up? It could be down. And I was like, well, no, because it's up. Because it's always been up. And they're like, but there is no up in space. It's not like there's an up and a down in space. And I'm like, well, because we go around the sun. And they're like, yeah, so we just flip your head upside down and now we go around the sun the other way. And now the South Pole is the North Pole. And I'm like, but it can't be. Because that's not the way I learned it.
Well, we've just labeled north and south, though, right? What you're really thinking of is up and down.
Yes.
But that's really a perspective of, like, where we live, like, northern hemisphere kind of Western civilization thing. If you live in South Africa, you think of south and north very differently.
Sure. But the idea that, and I understand the Occam's razor argument, and I thought about that, but just because something is unlikely doesn't mean it is impossible. Right?
No.
It could be that his parents are right. It's possible.
And if that's true, if that is the case and his parents are right, and the all of the homunculists that they call
that's what they were called, that's right.
Yeah. and they're right, and the world really did. How frustrating. Like, how incredible.
For them, for his parents.
Infuriating, yeah.
Yeah.
To have the entire
And to be
world.
mocked for...
So it's kind of like an analogy for how you feel when you think the world has left you behind. People have moved on. Their ideologies have changed. People are more accepting of certain lifestyles, and people want to include others, and they want to open borders, and they want to do all of these things, and it must be infuriating to feel left behind.
Yes, I totally agree. I agree. And because you want to scream at the top of your lungs, doesn't everyone know this, you're all wrong. Everyone's wrong.
Yeah, something isn't right here. How come you don't see it? And how come you're looking at me like I'm the one who's different?
Right. And I feel like that happens as you get older, right? Like, like there become, just by whatever, like society keeps moving. You've figured it out and you're not moving. But over time, there's like fewer and fewer of you until somebody's like, hey, Grandpa, you know, my friend is African American and he's an engineer. And your grandpa's like, right. Grumble, grumble, grumble.
Or like, you know, the gay couple with 2 kids moves in next door.
Right. And their kids didn't turn out gay. Weird.
Right. And they seem very remarkably well adjusted. And that just flies in the face of everything that you've believed up until that point.
Right. And so it's like the world has moved without you. Right. And so I totally get that. This is a scene, there's a line from Star Trek Next Generation, because you can't go a whole episode without talking about that, where they talk about this idea of, can there be validity in a culture of one? Like, is truth and is culture just a numbers game? Like the fact that North has to be up or whatever. Or can you be the one person? Are you allowed to be the one person for whom there is truth? And this is why I feel some sympathy, even though I know it's a little bit of a setup to look at the parents as crazy. If that number of people who were getting smaller became 50% of the population, 70% of the population, 90% of the population, they would very soon be the percentage of the population who wrote history books. And then it would be the son who was the crazy one who never could accept the truth.
Right.
Not just in that moment in time, but as a framework for the way that society looked at that period in time. Right? That the Greeks were the founders of democracy and that they kept off the heathen Ottoman Empire.
Right. Is it interesting? Well, do you see this as like kind of a rite of passage story in a way too? So you're coming home after being away from your family for a long time.
Yeah.
He's been gone for a year.
Yeah.
He comes home and he sees his parents because he's been in the city. And so he's coming home to a rural...
I didn't even think about that. That's a really good analogy.
He sees his parents all of a sudden very different than he used to see them.
Yeah, and he's at that age where that would start to happen anyway. Right,
and to him they seem very small. So that's where I was like, oh, this is so on the nose. Like, they're very small, they're small-minded, they live in their small town. And so it's just the author taking that and kind of expanding it to, like, well, what if they just physically became small? A very physical manifestation of how the son now sees his
super
parents.
Clever. That didn't occur to me, but that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, this story's an onion. It's a good one.
It's a good onion. I really like it. I think it's really interesting. So I'm curious what you would do if you were in the son's position. Would you argue with your parents about, maybe not your parents, but the story's parents? Would you argue with them? Would you try and convince them of the truth? Or you would just be like, home for the holidays, pass the cranberries.
Yeah, tiny mom. Do you need a hand with that? Like, I definitely would try to convince my parents that they were
wrong.
That they were wrong.
I mean, because in the story, it seems relatively true that they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be right, but they're probably wrong.
I thought it was interesting when the son pointed out the neighbors across the street, and he's like, look at them. They're fine.
Right.
They're all the same size. And the dad is like, that's so tragic.
Yeah.
Like, it had gotten to the whole family.
Right.
You know?
So you would try and convince them?
You'd have to try.
I don't know if I would. Honestly. And here's why
I mean, don't we always try to convince our relatives of our feelings on a particular subject if we feel that they're wrong? I mean, we're not talking about morality here, but, like, you're tiny. Like, there's a warped sense of reality. I think to a certain extent, you might give it a try. And
maybe
to a certain extent,
maybe
you
I'm
might
just
give it a try. And
maybe
then
I'm
you
just
let it
too
go.
tired.
Okay.
Maybe the last 4 years have just
You would
tired
just go
me
and
out
pretend
too
like
much.
nothing was wrong.
No, I wouldn't pretend anything was wrong. I think I would just like evade the conversation. They're like, "Oh, you got so big," and I'm like, "I guess so."
I can see that. Yeah, you're
weird,
right.
Like
It got me.
weird how my shoes don't fit tight. How my shoes got big with me.
Yep, everything did.
Right. But I feel like, and this is maybe just me becoming old and like stubborn about like the stupidity of people. Like, I don't know of anyone having changed their opinion about anything anymore. Like, I can't recall.
You've never changed your opinion about anything?
Yeah, I do. But I don't know of anyone else who has.
I have, for sure.
Have you ever had someone be like, "Let me tell you a couple of key points," and you go, "Huh, yeah."
Hi, this is Kolby, and you are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. But you already knew that, didn't you? If you'd like to support what we do at After Dinner Conversation, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/After Dinner Conversation. That's right, for as little as $5 a month, you can support thoughtful conversations like the one you're listening to. And as an added incentive for being a Patreon supporter, you'll get early access to new short stories and ad-free podcasts, meaning you'll never have to listen to this blurb again. At higher levels of support, you'll be able to vote on which short stories become podcast discussions, and you'll even be able to submit questions for us to discuss during these podcasts. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being the kind of person that supports thoughtful discussion.
Like, I can't recall.
You've never changed your opinion about anything?
Yeah, I do. But I don't know of anyone else who has.
I have, for sure.
Have you ever had someone be like, "Let me tell you a couple of key points," and you go, "Huh, yeah." I mean, I guess that's the whole point of the podcast, right? Is that you hear things to try and like expand your mind a little bit.
Right.
But which now I'm wondering, like, why are we doing this podcast? But in practice,
well, certainly not on social media.
No, not on social
But sitting
media.
down and having actual conversations with people, I feel like I've maybe not had my mind changed, but I've been made aware of nuance. Like nuance
I agree
really
with that.
Important.
I have been made aware of nuance. That's true. Where somebody will be like, "Hey, what about this other weird situation you haven't thought of?" And I was like, "That's a good point."
Yeah.
But is there nuance to the fact that my parents got tiny?
Well, I think that's one of the geniuses of this
It
story.
is. There is no nuance to
right.
it. It's just a truth or an untruth.
Like, you really have to face it.
Yeah. That is a genius to serve. So you would try and so I'm just curious, what is your conversation? So if I'm your dad and I'm like, you come or your hypothetical dad, maybe not your real dad, and I'm like, "You got ginormous," because that's the way all dads talk while they smell of Old Spice. You got ginormous. It got to you too. Like, what is your pitch to your dad?
I think I would need him. You would have to take a moment to really gather all the information. Like, wouldn't you go in and sit down and listen to them for a little bit before you started talking?
Like, let them wear themselves out?
Let them talk. Gosh, why do you think I got enormous? I think I would probably start with questions.
See, I think that's the way to do it. I think you sort of it's like a fake fade Perry, right? Where you're like, "Yeah, that's weird, right? Mm-hmm. It's weird that my shoes don't fit tighter." So somehow objects get bigger too.
Right. And I guess, where did you hear about this?
Yeah, maybe that's the way to do it.
This phenomenon that's affecting everybody in the entire world except for you.
I just don't know if I have a duty to do any of that.
No, I don't think so. Not really. Not in this particular circumstance.
Even for family members.
Wouldn't you feel like you wanted to help them get into a house that they could functionally live in, though? Everything is too big for them.
Like a Barbie house?
The title of the paper, "Help, I can't reach the doorknobs."
Yeah.
It's so absurd. It's insane.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. But here's the thing. We've talked about this before.
I mean, aren't there researchers trying to figure out why these people are shrinking?
But is the research even going to affect their opinion?
No, but the son would probably want to know what happened.
Yeah. I think the part that maybe has metastasized in me over the last 4 years is how much people's opinions become wrapped up in their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've struggled with that more over the years. And so I don't mess with anyone's opinions because it seems like every opinion is wrapped up in your identity. Like, even if you ask someone, like, who's better, Spider-Man or Iron Man? They're like, it's Iron Man. And if you try and make me change my mind, my whole id just fell apart.
For sure.
And you're just like, really? Because it's freaking stupid.
Well, I mean, there's definitely there's definitely hills people are willing to die on.
Yeah, and they're often the stupidest hills, by the way.
But it's interesting that you bring up, like, the fandom thing, like Spider-Man or Iron Man, because
people die on that hill.
It's a really interesting hill.
Star Trek and Star Wars.
People definitely go to bat for those.
And I just don't get it. Like,
I don't either. I feel like those are the things where I kind of shrug.
I would just let it
go. Well, I know my preference, but I'm not going to fight with you about why. Like,
yeah, it just
doesn't seem important.
So
but,
why
like, literally losing 3 feet off of your height?
So why do you do it? Like, what is your reason to try and explain to someone that their opinion is wrong? Because in my mind, the reason I don't explain it is, number one, I don't think I can actually change anyone's mind. And number two, I don't know that it does any harm to have an incorrect opinion. It's not like they're trying to do nuclear fusion. Number three, let me give you my number three.
Okay.
My number three is, I'm never 100% sure I'm right.
Oh, that's you got to have a certain amount of self-reflection.
Right. I'm not
humility.
I'm not entirely sure that 1/3 of the population didn't just shrink. Like, maybe I don't think their perspective is right, but it could be. So those are the 3 reasons why I just let everything go now. But I'm curious why you wouldn't let this go.
Oh, this one would be it's family. It's your parents. Now, if we're talking about somebody else, like a down the street
guy
neighbor,
on the bus,
I would definitely not even engage.
Yeah.
I've got no skin in the game there. But my parents.
So is the difference that you feel like you have an obligation to help?
I think it's about being on the same page with your family.
Okay.
Like, you want to share a worldview with the same people.
Wait a minute. So does this mean that
with your entire life? And so that split happening in your family has to be incredibly painful. You're going to do what you can to avoid that split.
I'm so calling bullshit on this.
Why?
Because do you seriously go to a Thanksgiving dinner and argue with your crazy relative about how, like, immigrants aren't ruining America, or how about, like, racism is kind of an outdated idea? Do you have those fights at the dinner table? Because I don't. My
family is not like that. We're all on the same page.
Oh.
We argue in support of each other. There's literally none of that conflict that happens in my family.
See, but now it makes sense. This is why you're willing to do it, because you have never done it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you want to continue, like, if you're me and you want to continue to be on the same page as your family, you're going to at least try. Because that rift is going to be incredibly painful.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. Let me tell you in real life.
Oh, for sure.
And it is. But now I understand why you're saying you would try this, because you've never beat your head up against that wall by actually trying this.
No. But that's what I'm saying. I think I would start with questions and be like, so why do you think that you're...
Yeah. I think trying to have this conversation is much easier to discuss in a podcast than to do.
Well, maybe that's my parents in a few hours, so if I show up there and they're 2 feet tall,
oh my God, that would be amazing. And more importantly, take photos. It's not true. It's never true unless it's on Instagram.
My whole family is very much aligned politically, philosophically.
Wow, that must be nice. That's
is.
Like a unicorn family.
I've had other family situations, like in-law situations.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Did not try.
Because you just don't care enough about them.
Yeah, that sounds super harsh, because I definitely do care about them. They're people, you know.
I'm not saying you don't care about them. I said you don't care enough about them.
Right. That relationship wasn't one that was already established. You go into that relationship already having those differences. And so if you show up and they're 2 feet tall, you're like, wow, you're 2 feet tall. No, you're massive. Okay, I'm massive. And you just kind of let that go.
You're right.
Whoa, I'm glad we got that on recording.
Now I'm thinking about, like, would I have this conversation with my mom or my sister? And the answer is yes, I would.
Yeah.
But I think the difference is what that bar is. Like, would I have that conversation with an uncle? No.
Yeah, where's the line?
Yeah, I think you've got to be like, it's a small circle. It's like a 3 to 5 person circle. I would have that conversation. You're right. I was thinking like big family dinner. And you're right. In a big family dinner, I would not have that conversation with the people. But if it were like the 2 or 3 or 4 people that I really was close to.
So what do you think you would say to
I
them?
might. I don't think I would try and change their mind. I'm of the opinion that the only way you change someone's mind is through, like, you have to have a conversation that's the equivalent of like peripheral vision.
Okay.
Well, you don't say like, "What if you're tiny?" You're like, because that doesn't work. You sort of do it from like a side eye sort of thing. Where you're like, "That's interesting. I wonder why this is happening. Like, I wonder what the scientists say. Like, I wonder..."
A lot of reflective listening.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of...
So what you're saying is...
Right, and there'd be a lot of repeating back what they're saying so
Right.
they could hear the absurdity of what they're saying when it is said clearly to them.
Well, those are good communication skills, period. Right?
I mean, I've never been accused of good communication skills, but...
Well, I'm complimenting you on your approach right now. Kolby,
Thank
so
you.
there go.
My hypothetical approach as opposed to my actual approach.
I mean, that's conflict resolution 101.
Right, because I feel like the only way you could get to somebody like this, if you cared enough to do it, was to repeat back to them what they're saying so that they can hear what they're saying.
Right.
Because sometimes when you hear what you're saying, you're like...
Or you make sure at least that you're hearing it right so that they can correct the record with you if
because once
you misunderstood.
Right, because once you start repeating things back in a clear way, you're like, well, but wait a minute, that thing I said in step 1 and that thing I said in step 4, like, how do you reconcile those two things? Those don't make sense.
Right.
And then they'll be like, oh, well, they don't. Like, in my mind's eye, that's how it would work. In actuality, it'd be like, no, they do. It's just war is peace.
You would have to give it time, too.
Yeah, you have to kind of walk away from the conversation.
For sure. Because you can't let situations like that get too combative. I mean, this young man obviously loves his family a great deal.
Sure.
And so he's not just going to walk away from them and never go back. He's going to keep trying.
Yeah. So there is one thing that they talked about that was a buzzword for me. And that is that he talked about how he had been lied to by the media. And that was the only part of the whole story where I thought sort of tipped the hat a little bit, maybe. But again, that might be my only perspective. From Trump people's perspective, it might be, they might read it and be like, no, lied to the media sounds perfect.
Both sides
Both think that the media is lying to them.
As lying to the other side.
Yeah.
Because of the media that you consume. But I think what tips it is he brings up there's one publication. It's the only one that they read.
So this is the other frustration I have is people are like, question the science, whether it's COVID, whether it's whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. And I'm always just like, yeah, question the science. Scientists should question the science. Like, your Google search should not be questioning the science.
Right. There's a misunderstanding about how the scientific method works and the scientific community works. But then people would have you believe that they're lying to us about how that actually works.
Right.
How can we actually know that this is how the scientific community works? Peer-reviewed studies and all.
Right. Because you don't know how it works. You're just believing them when they tell you.
Reproducible results.
Right. And that's... I don't know.
Studies getting thrown out because the results weren't... You couldn't reproduce the results, and so the one study is bad.
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes up, and this was lied to the media and the science, is I feel like there are certain phrases that people will say where I just immediately think to myself, oh, you're gone. Like, you're too far gone.
Yeah.
Like, you're unsavable at this point.
And I've definitely walked away from relationships with people like that.
Where you're just like, where they're like, no, it's everyone lying. And I'm like, you mean like AP and Reuters?
Well,
they're like, yeah, they lie too. And I'm like,
yeah.
Really? Because they just sell news to other people.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, they're biased. And you're just like, and it's like, I've got trigger things now where I'm like, oh, you're done. You're done. Like, you've had the Kool-Aid.
And watching people talk about, I mean, I talk about being a teacher a lot because I am one. So obviously it's a big part of my life. But when watching people talk about teachers, claiming to be my friend, and me trying to reach out and be like, I'm a teacher. You could ask me.
You could ask me what the problem with teachers are.
We could have...
Why teachers are struggling. You could just ask me.
I remember there being, like, during the election, there were the whole child trafficking craziness. Do
The
you
one
remember
out of the
that?
pizza place?
No, this
Oh.
is after that. This is during, they were talking about just, like, in general, massive conspiracy surrounding child trafficking in the Democratic
Yeah,
Party
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And somehow teachers got caught up in that.
Oh, I didn't hear that part.
Teachers were involved in trafficking children, and that was a line for me. Like, wow, you really think that okay.
We're done. We're done. We're not having conversations anymore.
And you try a little bit to kind of
Yeah.
reach out and be like, so when you said that, what did you mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
a teacher, and the response is either stonewalling
Yeah.
or it's
What was that, dude? Oh, it's like a
it's
scooter
pretty
outside.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's
Gonna
either
find out how good these microphones are.
Yep. It's either stonewalling or they don't answer the question.
Right.
And at that point, you're like, well, you can't even acknowledge that you have crossed a line here by encouraging teachers as a profession of being
Yeah.
child abusers.
Yeah.
So we're done.
We're done. We got nothing more to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fortunately, it's been very few experiences that I've had with that. But
Yeah. I think I just am willing to shrink my number of people I interact with more and more and more, which is probably not good, but
I think quarantine did that for all of us,
that's a good point.
in a way. Voluntarily or no.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to chat about with this? I feel like we've
No.
run this pretty well.
Yeah, we're starting to actually get off the topic.
That's all good.
No, this was a great story. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to Alexis as well, who probably, I feel like Alexis probably, this is not a totally hypothetical story that she wrote.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear if Alexis has
Oh my
anything
gosh.
to say back to us.
I hope she tweets it. That'd be amazing. Yeah. So you've been listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. You can get our magazine. It's a monthly magazine on our website, afterdinnerconversation.com. You can also get it on Amazon, Hulu, every place there is. Probably that kid going by on the scooter could get it somewhere. Apple, Kindle, Nook, you name it. It's everywhere now. You can get it for $4.99 for the first year, and then it's like $20 every year after that. We also have print publications that you can get on Amazon. We have 4, soon to be 5. Each one of those is some of our very best stories. And who knows, Alexis's story, Home for the Holidays, could certainly qualify as one of those. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed listening to this, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. The vast majority of people haven't liked and subscribed, which means maybe it shows up in your algorithm, maybe it doesn't. So don't leave that to chance. Just go ahead and hit that button, and we'd sure appreciate that. And that way we can keep doing what we're doing, and you're not left to the whims of some algorithm. Thanks.